For our weekend Labor Day session of this year, 2021, I would like to take some inspiration from the Italian poet Dante Alighieri, whose death anniversary happens to be this month, 2021. He died in September of 1321, and there are commemorations and celebrations of Dante's life and his work in different places. And in my workplace at Perkins School of Theology, yesterday we had, not just yesterday, but for 3 days, we had a Dante festival, including a Dante symposium. And I was invited to offer some remarks on Dante and Buddhism, whatever that may entail. Not that Dante knew anything about Buddhism or that he practiced anything like Buddhism, but somehow in looking at his life and his work, there are elements that we can find in resonance with Buddhist practice. So I would like to offer for today's talk, and maybe tomorrow, a Zen eye on Dante. Dante is most well known for his trilogy called the Comedy, or called later the Divine Comedy. That is a spiritual journey taking the reader with Dante as a guide and with Virgil as Dante's own guide, Virgil, the Latin poet, going through Inferno, or hell, Purgatorio, purgatory, and Paradiso, or paradise. So 3 stages of the spiritual journey. And as I looked at this entire corpus and also reread some parts, I realized that we have things to learn from Dante's spiritual pilgrimage that led him through the depths of hell, which are simply mirrors, or rather manifestations of the state that we ourselves can create due to our own delusions and ignorance and pride and avarice and so on, all of the things that come with a self-centered mindset, which brings us to hell. And I'll talk more about that later. Then, having seen through that, looking for a way of being liberated from all of that misery and suffering, which is what Buddhism is all about, looking at the dissatisfactory condition of our human existence based on the kinds of misleading things that we pursue. We seek liberation from that, and we seek a transformation of our way of life and our way of seeing and our values and our priorities. And that would be the struggle that can correspond with what Dante calls Purgatorio, the purification of the human spirit, having realized that it needs to have a transformation, it needs to undergo a transformation towards becoming more fully what it is. And so in that process, there is a struggle, there is a sense of incompleteness, there is a sense of going further. And then finally, we arrive at a stage that enables us to bask in the light, the state of Paradiso. Now, learning from that, I would like to take some aspects of Dante's own pilgrimage that resonate with our own Zen path and take it from there and be able to deepen our own Zen practice with Dante's pointers in that regard. First of all, Dante was born in the 13th century, 1265, I believe. I may be mistaken, but in any case, he was about in his mid to late 30s when he began writing the Divine Comedy. And the circumstances behind it are that he already was a well-known intellectual and politician in his own land at that time. He was involved in politics of power struggles between this or that faction. I won't go into the details. But because of that kind of involvement, there were certain powers who saw him as a threat. And so he was consigned to exile. He was exiled from his native city of Florence, and he was banned from staying there. All his property was confiscated, and all his titles were taken from him. So with that, then he sought refuge from friends, and he lived in a friend's house, and he had some benefactors who helped him. And it was then at that time of his life that, since he could no longer be involved in politics directly, he had the time and the leeway to look inside himself and ask the big questions. And in asking those big questions, that is when he came up with his greatest work, the comedy, which includes precisely the trips, the visits to hell, to purgatory, and to paradise, symbolizing the stages of the human pilgrimage toward the ultimate. Dante begins his well-known poem Inferno with these words: midway through the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood, for the straight way had now been lost. That's the beginning of this book of 33 chapters, which then goes on to the next book of another 33 chapters, and then finally concludes with Paradiso of the 33 chapters. Some of you may have had the joy of reading all of it or parts of it, or at least are acquainted with it. But with this beginning, let us see what resonates within our own Zen practice and within our own lives. Midway through the journey of our life, I found myself within a dark wood, for the straight way had now been lost. Having been deprived of his property and of his title and of his place in society, Dante is now at a stage in his life where he's asking the big questions. What's this all about? What is my life all about? How can I live from here on in a way that realizes the deepest aspirations of my heart? And what are those? Many of us may have turned to Zen practice at a time of our lives when we asked those basic questions. What am I doing with my life? Where am I heading? What have I done up to now? And how can I live the rest of my life in a way that I can be truly content and realize that this is a true gift and that I can live the fullness of my potential, whatever that may be. So at this point, I'd like to invite everybody to just look back at your own state of mind and state of being and come back to that point where you are asking those big questions. At this point, most of you, practically all of you, have already been on the path for some time now. So we may tend to take things for granted and just go on as if everything was normal. But this event that happened to Dante, whereby he was suddenly deprived of all of the things that he was taking for granted, his property, his title, his position in society, and was just left totally alone and poor, was for him a new beginning, a life that enabled him to contribute to humanity, that such that we still treasure and we still value and we still enjoy the fruits of his efforts then in having written this classic Paradiso, this classic Divine Comedy or Divina Commedia. So the question I'd like to invite each and every one of us to ask is, are there some treasures in my life that I have yet to uncover and realize and fulfill and embody, so that I may be able to give that treasure and acknowledge that treasure and give it to humanity, so that I can make a contribution to humanity in my own way? Well, the only treasure that we can really contribute to humanity is ourselves. And that is what I'd like to invite us to really take as our starting point. The question, who am I? And what am I called to be? How am I called to give myself to the world as my gift to the world? But we can only ask those questions once we have come to a place where we are settled within ourselves and we are able to find our home within ourselves. So this practice of Zen invites us to take this time on a regular basis to just be still and allow ourselves to truly appreciate just being here and now, alone and poor. Okay, you may still have your house, you may still have your car, you may still have your bank account and all of that, but put all of that into brackets and realize that those are only extraneous parts that can be taken away from you anytime. And so the question is, what is that which can never be taken away from me, no matter what? What is the bare rock bottom 0 point on which my whole being relies and my whole being is grounded? And that is what we're all invited to keep returning to as our home, that place where we have emptied all of our accoutrements of name, property, attachments, and in having emptied all of that, we are simply right here, right now. And that place is beyond time and space. There are two ways that Zen practice offers for us to be able to arrive at that place of freedom, where we can be truly ourselves and we can unearth the treasures of the universe that are within each and every one of us. The first mode is, of course, the mode that is known as just sitting. And as you have learned from orientation, there are different ways in which we can really arrive at that sitting. For beginners, we are advised to take a posture that is conducive to stillness, with our back straight, with our legs in a position of not being put on pressure, but enabling us to sit in a way that is relaxed and yet that is attentive. And then breathing in and breathing out from the lower abdomen, so that our breath is really the center of our attention. And then we put our mind and heart to precisely to that place where we are breathing in and breathing out, and allow the mind and heart to rest in the here and now, just being with the breath. So those are the three elements of Zen posture, of the Zen pose: taking a posture conducive to stillness, breathing in and breathing out with attention, and then allowing the mind to rest in the here and now with the breath as its center, and yet open to the whole universe in doing so. That is a basic description of what is entailed in just sitting. not seeking anything, not grasping for anything, not trying to have anything, not trying to think about or to learn anything, but just being. Some of you in your intentions earlier indicated that your intention is just to sit and be, in the different words that you convey that. So let us make that truly embodied in not just this weekend session, but in each and everything we do and each and every situation we find ourselves for the rest of our lives. Going back to the basics of just being right here, right now. And so for that, we need to give ourselves that leeway, that time and space to be able to simply just be and withdraw from the normal things that occupy us, that make us hectic, or that make us have to go from one thing to another and so on, and then lose our base. So our Zen practice invites us to keep coming back to this place, here and now, where I am alone and poor and ready to open the treasures of the universe. This alone and poor reminds us of a koan in the series called The Gateless Gate, about a monk named Seize, who was speaking with his master, who asked Master Sozan, "Master, I am alone and poor. Help me become prosperous." And Sozan tells him, "Master Zei." And he says, "Yes, master." So Sozan then tells him, "You have just drunk of the 3 finest cups of wine in the whole of China, and yet you say you are still alone and poor. What are you saying?" Master Sozan is inviting Seize to realize the richness that is already there, right there, as he was simply saying, "Master, I'm alone and poor," calling his attention. "Venerable Zei." "Yes, master." In that short exchange, Sozan is inviting Seize to realize the infinite treasures right there at that very moment, within that exchange. And that is precisely where we are also invited to put our gaze into, right here, right now, as we breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out, and enter into that stillness, and let that stillness open out to the infinite riches of all that there is, of all that we are together in this universe, not lacking anything. So that's the first point that we take from Dante when he was deprived of his possessions and of his titles, and he was simply alone and poor, seeking refuge. That's when the treasures of his life began to be gushing forth from him, as he had that leeway to be able to write what was in him that came out as the Divine Comedy, which we now relish and cherish as a treasure for humanity, talking about the spiritual journey of humanity that resonates with us all. He was doing it, of course, within a specific cultural and religious context, the context of medieval Christendom. And so he had his presuppositions, he had his ideas and so on that come out. But those are things that we can look at and understand the deeper intent without getting into the particular ways that Dante expressed this or that, but to look at the overall direction that Dante is leading us. Namely, that this time of our life is a very precious time in which we can delve into the riches of our own true self, the riches of the universe that are already there lying within us. And so through this practice, they can be unearthed and manifested and shared with the rest of the world. So I gave you the first approach that Zen offers. A second approach that Zen practice offers is through practicing with a koan that empties out our mind and our thoughts and our being and allows it to be truly nothing. And this is through the well-known koan that we all have heard about, or some are practicing it, or some have practiced it and are now coursing through its implications, namely the koan mu. This is something that is given to those who realize that they are asking the big questions in life, the question of who am I, what am I called to do in life, how may I realize my true self. And so once one is given this koan, the main thing that one is called to do is to simply sit and be still in the same way as just sitting. And with every out breath, accompany that out breath with that sound mu. We all know that this starting point of this koan is a question by a monk, the Zen master Joshu. Master, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? Joshu answers, mu. Now that question, does a dog have Buddha nature or not, really is just a trigger. It's asking about Buddha nature, about a certain sentient being that the monk happens to have seen perhaps along the wayside, and puts that question to the Zen master. But it's not just about the dog. It's really asking about Buddha nature, that Buddha nature which is understood as being totally open and including everything and incorporating all the treasures of the universe and indicating what our true self is all about. We are all endowed with Buddha nature, that infinite and boundless reality of awakening right from the start and even now and without end. So how can we realize that Buddha nature? Is that also in the dog? Or is that also in the tree? Or is that also in me? All of those questions are behind that question of the Zen monk to Joshu. Does a dog have Buddha nature or not? And Joshu's response is direct. Mu. And that is our cue for this mode of practice. Take that mu and simply allow it to guide us to that place that is still and that is totally emptied of everything, emptied of every thought, every sense of wanting, every sense of grasping, and just allowing that mu to open up and embrace everything in the universe, including ourselves, or rather beginning with ourselves. So once we have really entered into that place where we have emptied all of our thoughts and our possessions and our aspirations and are simply just there as mu, something opens up and gushes forth effusively, and we will see how the treasures of the universe gush forth out of that mu, filling the universe and filling our hearts with joy and gratitude for the rest of our lives and beyond. So that is the second approach that Zen takes to the question, who am I? What am I to do with my life? First, just be still. And in being still, you will realize. Or the other approach is just be still and empty yourself with mu and allow everything to be emptied out into mu, and you will see. So with these, we have what we need to be able to arrive at those treasures and uncover them and unearth them and take possession and bask in them and shower in them and soak in them and allow them to be given to the rest of the world and to the universe. Right there, where you are. So let us continue. I will talk more about other aspects tomorrow, but for now, we are geared to just entering into that place where those treasures of the universe can gush forth every here and now, just arriving at that place of stillness, just being, or just emptying every thought of being or having or thinking or knowing, and just allowing to be permeating and soaking everything. And as we allow that to happen, we will see with new eyes and behold paradise here and now. Let us chant.
Boundless compassion,
absorbing world sounds awakens the Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens the Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recalls it, in the dark recalls it. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens the Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recalls it, in the dark recalls it. Moment after moment,